ASEAN countries have high hopes on India that India will grow and counter the growing weight of China. In Act East policy, I'll talk about India, ASEAN, BIMSTEC, and all those things also. And obviously, China factor is always there. So all this will be the topic of discussion in this lecture. So, fine. So let us start the lecture. Act East policy. So as you can see today, as I speak today, 2021, our India's overall trade with, let's say, ASEAN countries with 1 minute, I'll just show you the map, then it'll be much more easier for you, because without identifying, India is here. So ASEAN, then taking China, Japan, and Korea. These three things, these countries in the east part of to the east of India, they are now more than 1/3 of India's overall trade. As you know, China is the biggest trading partner of India, and ASEAN in the last years are caught up. ASEAN is now the 4th largest trading partner of India as a whole. This is economically a vibrant region, and a region growing very fast in spite of corona and other problems. And India's trade is also increasing every year with this region. And apart from that, there are other connectivities, cultural connectivities are also there. About all this, we'll talk about it. So I'm just talking about the importance of this region as a whole. West Asia may provide a lot of India's energy supplies, but there's a huge market both for Indian services and Indian goods and Indian agricultural products to the east of India, because these countries are, most of them are booming economies, large population. So this is very, very important for India. So we'll talk, we have to, obviously, history is very important. Without that, though we don't give too much importance to it, without understanding the history of what happened in the past, we cannot talk about it right now. In the 60s, and ASEAN was seen as the ASEAN was not there. They were trying to start an organization called ASEAN in the 70s, and that was at that time the prime movers were Thailand and all. Thailand still today is the closest partner of India in ASEAN. But India was not very ready, because India saw this through the Cold War prism. At that time, communism was there in Vietnam, even today, then Laos and Cambodia. So some of the American friendly countries like Thailand, they wanted to start an organization which India perceived that could be, suck us into the Cold War. Many of these countries are also part of military treaty partners of US under SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, similar to NATO. So which US was cultivating against the growing influence of Soviet Union and China and communism in Southeast Asia. So India didn't want to join that, and officially we said we are geographically not part of ASEAN. Then, of course, ASEAN grew, particularly the so-called tiger economies, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, after it became independent from Malaysia, to some extent Indonesia, to Philippines, definitely. So India was watching the rapid or exponential growth of this small but very vibrant countries in Southeast Asia. Most of them were also democracies, though that is not of a major concern for India. So things changed in 91. 91, as you know, is a watershed year for India, for the world itself, because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and India lost its important partner, trading partner also, because not only military supplies or diplomatic support in United Nations Security Council, but an important trading partner also, because India used to sell a lot of textiles, leather, tea to Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact Eastern European countries. Suddenly, we were, we had to look for new partners, and India liberalized under pressure from IMF and all that. India also saw a political change with Narasimha Rao becoming the prime minister in 92 after the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. Things are changing economically, politically, and India is looking for new partners. And we have been watching the exponential growth of these tiger economies of Southeast Asia in the previous decade. It was natural that we want to learn from them, learn from the so-called economic miracle. I think countries which were as poor as India in the 60s and 70s, through economic reforms, how they have come up and vastly reduced their poverty and inequality was definitely an economic lesson for India to learn as we embarked on a new journey of economic liberalization. So therefore, it's a kind of a win-win situation. So that is where, in a very famous speech, the then Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao, in 1992, outlined our policy towards ASEAN, that is known as Look East policy. So LEP, Look East policy. So that was the beginning of the relationship, which is founded on various pillars, because as you know, Southeast Asia, India, and us, from time immemorial, we have got cultural and trading connect, political connect also, particularly from southern part of India. During the time of Cholas, Pallavas, and the eastern Chalukyas. So trade was booming between the southern part of the India and these economies. And even beyond that, even up to China, Korea, Japan also. So, but later, after 16th, 17th centuries, these cultural connects were, because of this trading connect, Hinduism and later Buddhism spread from India to these countries. And even the Islam followed in Malaysia and Indonesia. This came from Indian subcontinent, not from Arabia. They follow more not the Wahhabi form of Saudi Arabian Islam, but the more tolerant subcontinental form of inspired by Sufism. So every major religion followed in Southeast Asia at some point of time has gone from India because of the close trading connections what we used to have. But as I said, British came, there Dutch and Portuguese came, English came, French came. So the last 2-3 centuries, this connect, political, cultural, trading connect has been less. But because of the traditional civilizational contacts, cultural contacts, India has always been respected and loved by the people of Southeast Asia. Whereas China, they almost all of them have borders with China. They are racially Mongoloid people, but culturally very close to India, except maybe Vietnam is not that close, and Philippines has absolutely no connect with India culturally. Vietnam, southern part, the Mekong Basin definitely was connected to culturally to India, but not the northern, middle and northern part. But other than that, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Laos, Cambodia, lot. So Myanmar, obviously. So all these countries have been very closely connected with India culturally, as I said, for many centuries, even before the Christian era. So this has always been there. So these countries were also welcoming India's collaboration. Obviously, at that time, India was starting out in 92, right? Act East policy. It coincided at that time with Thailand's Look West policy. As I keep on saying, Thailand has always been the closest friend of India in ASEAN countries in the Southeast Asia. And Thailand and the interests, we have to see the whether our interests merge, coincide, or run parallel to each other. So that happened, and 92 India applied for a sectorial partnership with ASEAN countries, which was accepted. So 92, so next year 2022, we'll be celebrating 30 years of partnership. Initially, it was restricted to a few areas only, like culture, trade and all that. So later, 95 became a full sectoral partner. Later, 97, we started an organization called not with all the countries. As I said, some countries like Vietnam and Philippines, India has got very less cultural connect per se. So, but with some countries, BIMSTEC was started. So maybe you can, yes or not that important in mains. In prelims, chota mota things they may ask, but in mains, the bigger issues are always, very important. Instead of 92, you write 93. I don't think anybody is going to reduce marks for that as long as you understand the bigger picture about what is happening in the present thing. 97, 92, we become a sectoral dialogue partner. 95, we became a full dialogue partner. And BIMSTEC was started by the India and Thailand together. B for Bangladesh, I for India, M for Myanmar, S for Singapore, and T for Thailand. Three countries from in South Asia, and two countries from South Asia and three from Southeast Asia started it. Later, we also added Nepal and Bhutan. So the two countries which do not have maritime connected. So therefore, we renamed it as Bay of Bengal Initiative for multi-sectoral, technical and economic cooperation. So far, 97 4 summit meets have taken place. The last summit meet was 2018 in Kathmandu, and every year they have ministerial connections, or also ministerial meets go on. And so far, as I said, the 4 summit meets have taken place. We have identified some 6 priority areas in which working groups have always also been set up, and they also meet periodically for furthering some talk, some regular interactions takes place. So that is the whole idea behind it. So, but as I said, this lost momentum. The reason being, periodically India tries to revive it, right? So Thailand for long periods of time has been under military control, and it is embroiled in its own domestic problems. Even today, the problem is like that. Still, military is under control, and there have been anti-king protests, and there have been political, pro-military and anti-military forces, or yellow shirts versus red shirts problem. So Thailand, though, is growing economically because it is all these Southeast Asian countries are linked to China by their supply chain network. But at the same time, their internal domestic problems prevented them from thinking about more closer interaction. Myanmar, of course, has been a lot of problems. Even today, it has got a military rule. India has its own problems, and later I'll tell why this is not working out. So this has been, that's why there have been only 4 summit meets, and no real progress has taken place. That is the real thing. The biggest grouse against India, though India is loved and respected in Southeast Asia because of age-old civilizational connects, the problem right now is economic diplomacy. You talk, and India talks, China delivers. This is the biggest problem. This is the perception, and to a large extent, this is also true. We have to accept the mistakes. As I keep on saying, patriotism is about accepting what we lack and then try to find out solutions to all that and move, and not blind jingoism. Anyway, we have been talking, and nothing has been. For example, BIMSTEC. Coastal shipping. I said, so coastal shipping is very, very important. All these countries are BIMSTEC literal countries, except Nepal and Bhutan, which are anyway too small and doesn't really count for in the larger picture. BIMSTEC coastal shipping. A draft agreement was signed in 2017. Today, 2021, 4 years have gone. Nothing has happened to it. So we have to sign the real agreement, operationalize it, and then only trade will boom. Nothing is happening. So similarly, we have other agreements. So BIMSTEC FTA we have been talking for more than 10 years now, and nothing has happened so far. So unless and until we move forward and integrate these countries, this is very little can be done. Anyway, so BIMSTEC is one of the aspects of Look East policy. Then in 2000, we started Mekong Ganga Cooperation, another grouping which only India from this thing, and the 5 Mekong states, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So these 5 countries, not China, which China, the Mekong River originates in China, and South Asia is only Ganga. Maybe we could have invited Bangladesh also. Maybe at that time Sheikh Hasina was not in power. BNP, which was supposed to be anti-India and pro-Pakistan, was in power. That is why we left that, because Ganga, at the end of the day, Padma and other things go into Bangladesh also. Because as I keep on saying, Bangladesh is central for India's Look East policy and the development of Northeast. So anyway, 2000 MGC has also been started. Again, nothing much has taken place, and again, it remains a talking shop rather than any meaningful things have taken place on this. So as I said, FTA between BIMSTEC and India, more than 23-24 rounds of negotiations have taken place, and nowhere it is in sight. So there is then later, as part of our Look East policy, when Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee continued the good work done by Mr. Narasimha Rao, and we expanded the Look East policy. Therefore, it is known as Look East Policy 2. LEP 1 was started in 1992. That exact year we know it because that was a speech made by the Narasimha Rao, Mr. Narasimha Rao. So 1992, that was essentially focusing upon Southeast Asia and also mostly focusing upon economic factors. Whereas Look East Policy 2 was during the early 2000s, exact years, what we can see, a lot of work was done by Mr. Jaswant Singh, the then foreign minister under Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and it has 2 different dimensions. So now it became much wider in geographically. So not only Southeast Asia, it started including China, Korea, and Japan, and to some extent Australia also. Australia, New Zealand to some extent. But not only economically, it also started focusing upon military defense collaborations also. Because at that time, what happened during the early 2000s was China has already been rising. And not only that, there are South China Sea disputes about which I'll be talking about it later with many of the ASEAN countries. So ASEAN countries are worried about the exponential rise of China and the military expansion of China and this increasing territorial claims in South China Sea, which impacted on their own territorial integrity and security. As I said, many of these countries share border with China. So they were worried about the rise of China, and therefore they wanted India to rise faster. They wanted India to act as a counterweight. Of course, another thing was happening around the early 2000s. 2001, 9/11 happened. So US is traditionally known as the a resident power of Southeast Asia. That's a traditional word used there. Though it is geographically not part of the area, it used to be the resident power. As I said, it used to have treaty associations with Thailand, etc. And Philippines, they used to have a naval base and air base also. But now the focus of US shifted to West Asia and Central Asia. They launched attacks in Afghanistan and Iraq and got mired into the problem. So a lot of space, strategic space was vacated by US. US also at the same time closed down its bases in Philippines, which used to be its colony in the early 2000s. Before it got independence, Philippines. So US was going out of that. So US was focusing upon West Asia and Central Asia because of after the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism. American military industrial complex has to find some enemy to sustain itself, to continue its relevance. Like Pakistan military has to portray India as an enemy to sustain itself or to maintain its hold. Same thing, US military industrial complex, similarly, they have to create problems throughout the world so as to keep on selling arms to various countries. So that happened. And US got mired into the problems of Central Asia and West Asia, and finally they have to, after 20 years, now they are going back without meeting any of their strategic objectives, which we discussed a lot in Afghanistan. So as the US was vacating, there's a strategic vacuum in Southeast Asia, and the fast rising China was filling that up. That's natural. I always said zero-sum game. Though there's a difference of opinion among the political scientists whether there is really zero-sum game exists or not. But these ASEAN countries, which were always liking India, because culturally, as I said, a lot of things they have learned from India over several millennia. So they wanted India to rise faster, because India, after 10 years of reforms, started in 91, has been slowly picking up, from 3 to 4% growth in the 90s. We are going to 5 to 6% growth in the early 2000s, when this change is happening, when US has vacated and moved to other parts of the world, when China has become a real great power after more than 2.5 decades of 10 plus digit growth, and flexing up, slowly started modernization of its army and navy. And they have rightly identified that China could pose a threat to their own security, particularly because of the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. So this coincided, as I said, Lookie's policy coincided with Look West policy of Thailand. Here the whole collective aspirations of these countries were that India should play a more meaningful role, and India was also ready to do so. So therefore, as I said, the geographical domain of Lookie's policy too was bigger, and at the same time we also had impact on military front also, and defense collaboration also. We started naval exercises with like Singapore. We have SIMBEX. Even today we are continuing that bilateral maritime exercise. Annually it is being held since 1994. Milan multi-nation exercise. Initially it was between the navies of India and the Southeast Asian countries, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Brunei and Indonesia. And the most significant military collaboration with India has occurred with that of Vietnam. So sometime in 2000, because Vietnam and China have fought a land boundary war also in the 70s, and in the 70s a naval war also over Spratly Islands. So Vietnam, though it is very small, it wants to be independent. So it shares though 1,300 kilometers borders with China. So Vietnam has been, from the time of communism, because Vietnam was a communist country and India was closer to Soviet Union. India has got very good close relationship with Vietnam, and now because of the rising China, Vietnam wanted closer defense collaboration with India. So in year 2000, India and Vietnam signed a military cooperation agreement, and later a lot of high-level visits, prime ministers of both countries visited each other, and we signed, India also announced sometimes in the 2007-8 period, $500 million line of credit, military line of credit was also announced by India, and under which they purchased some military helicopters. India started giving training to because they also operate a lot of Russian origin planes and submarines. So India gave training for them in India to improve their capabilities. India started, there was talk in the media that India, a couple of years back, India may also offering BrahMos missile, which I said rubbish, because India cannot sell it without Russia's permission. It's a joint product, and Russia is a close friend of China. Obviously, Russia will not offer that to ruffle feathers with China. So, but India was also granted use of a port. We started annual naval exercises, and then Vietnam gave access to India in one of the islands in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is very close to China. As you can see, Gulf of Tonkin, that part is known as Nha Trang. I'm not sure whether it is there in the map or not. These are all Haiphong, Kampha. Many of the tourists, Indian tourists, also go there to these places, but I don't think that is there in Gulf of Tonkin. Okay, Gulf of Tonkin, you can see. So India was given also access. Indian naval ships used to visit this place, and OVL was given 2 blocks by Vietnam for exploration, oil and gas exploration in the South China Sea. So many things are going on with Vietnam as a focus of our defense collaboration, and these countries wanted India's more closer interaction with them, as I said, because of their US being vacating that strategic space and China fast filling that space. So India, they consider as a benign power, a friendly country, and a country large enough. These are all small countries. So naturally, it's like asymmetry, like between India and the South Asian neighbors have a lot of asymmetry, and therefore they want China to play an increased role to as a counterweight to that of India. These small Southeast Asian countries which are border with China and have territorial disputes with China also wanted another counterweight here India. What role China plays in South Asia, Southeast Asian countries wanted India to play there. So this was a kind of a win-win situation for both, and therefore the relationship, went on increasing. And obviously, we have to know. So at that time, during when Lookie's policy was announced, we realized that we cannot achieve the potential unless and until there is connectivity. Proper connectivity is there. So connectivity, for the connectivity projects, India started that trilateral highway project, which I mentioned in Myanmar from Moreh to Mysot, India, Myanmar, Thailand. And Thailand is very well connected to other Southeast Asian countries from Moreh border to Mysot in this thing through Myanmar, 1,300 kilometers long highway. And at that time, only UNCTAD came up with that Asian railway, which also I talked about it, connecting all the way from the Pacific coast of Vietnam to Turkey. It will obviously will be going via India, and all these projects were started with great fanfare. So to increase connectivity, therefore to boost trade. Then in the year 2000, we signed an FTA with FTA for goods. With the ASEAN came into force in 2011 for furthering our economic interlinkages. Then at the same time, for cultural linkages, we started Nalanda University in one of the ASEAN meets only, EAS meets only. Japan proposed it. East Asian Summit meet, India also became a partner. India became a partner in ARF also around the same time. India became an annual summit partner also from 2002 onwards. So our political interaction, ASEAN plus one summit meet, EAS East Asia Summit meet, ARF Summit started in 1998. All those things, India became a thing. And in the one of the EAS Summit meets 2003 or 4, Japan proposed to restart the Nalanda University. This is for the cultural connect, Buddhism. So India did that when Mr. Manmohan Singh was power. He also took a lot of measures to further the India-ASEAN relationship, because ASEAN is the core of India's Lookie's policy or Act East policy. So lot of bonhomie was there. And in fact, India during Manmohan Singh period in the second half of 2000s are the first time registered 10% economic growth. So India is now seen as a miracle. Suddenly, within a space of 15 years after starting our economic reforms, they have started bearing fruit, and coinciding with India becoming a global IT power. And these countries are, wanted again more closer relationship with India, because China was still growing, and obviously, but India is now was seen as a, a major, previously when they started in early 2000s, India was still growing 5 to 6%. It is a reasonably good growth, but that is not enough. When India started growing 9%, 10% on a continuous basis, and even after the global financial crisis in 2008, India was still growing for 2-3 years. Of course, from 2011, we started going down because of fiscal deficit. We have to, prune down various projects. So all these things come, cumulative impact of all that. US, China, India, trilateral, this kind of things started working out there. And they wanted, in fact, in 2007, Singapore, the then Singapore Prime Minister Lee Kuan-yew, Singapore majority people are Chinese people, and he was always a skeptic. Though he was not anti-India, he was a skeptic about India's ability for sustaining its economic growth. He said that we want India to grow. He said India and China are vital for making this 21st century as an Asian century. India, China and ASEAN together can make this century as an Asian century. And he said India and China will be the growth engines for the rest of Asia. So he has equated for the very first time India with China after seeing India's ability to grow. because India still have its structural problems. That is why I will come and talk about that more in economy rather than here. So what I was saying was the feelings were so good, and we expected that a lot of things will happen. Particularly, that is the reason we signed the FTA in 2010. Though some people in India, particularly, there was a lot of opposition from Kerala because of import of palm oil and all that things, etc. I'm not going back to that. So things were, moving up, looking up, and things really were looking up between India and Southeast Asia. But things were not, and of course, things were. India's growth rate started coming down from 2011 onwards, and India started more inward looking, a higher inflation, and that led to the political change. And in the elections, Mr. Modi came to power, and Mr. Modi also started on a very good note. So in 2014, he announced that it's no more look east policy, it will be act east policy. Now it is more act east policy. So act east policy is, the geographic coverage has been widened. In Look East First policy, it is only Southeast Asia or ASEAN countries. Later, Look East 2 policy expanded it to East Asia, to Japan, Korea, and Peninsula, and China, and also to Australia. Now, may not be Australia, but now it is also into Pacific. The word Indo-Pacific were exactly coined only in 2017, but this was much earlier than that, 2014, when Mr. Modi took power, when he, for the first time in November 2014, normally in November, October only, ASEAN-India summit meet happens. In his very first meet, he articulated his vision for furthering India-ASEAN relations, and he said that we no more look east. We want to act east. We want to do something more. So, therefore, he started using the small Pacific Ocean island. On that basis, we conducted later, Prime Minister, when he went to Fiji, we conducted the first meeting. I mentioned all that in the ocean thing in the, I think, second or third lecture. Pacific, Australia, New Zealand are also added geographically. But apart from that, it became more of a strategic relationship. So, India knows that it is going to be there. And though it is geographically not part of the Southeast Asia or East Asia, we just want to contribute more. We have signed strategic agreements with most of this. With ASEAN, we have with China, we have with Japan, we have with Korea. With Japan, we have comprehensive strategic with Korea. With Australia also we have. So India's interaction with the eastern part of the world has started increasing after that. So things going on well. So later, slowly, it is many experts, strategic experts, watchers, feel that the relationship is on downswing in the last 2-3 years. But it is due to various factors which started after 2014. So what are the reasons and what we have to do to revive the relations and take it to the next level? First, of course, you have to at least go back to the status quo or go back to what we were previously, and then only we can go to the next level, upwards margin. Simple. Now, slowly and steadily, China, the China factor is always there, though it is not that important when we discuss with ASEAN, because ASEAN countries even today want India-China relations to India-ASEAN relations to improve, to counter to that of China. So first one is India's reluctance in various factors have been affecting India's relationship with ASEAN countries. India's reluctance for deeper economic cooperation. So as I said, because of that, initially political opposition, forget about that. But after signing of that FTA, right, the bilateral trade between India and it was brought into 2011 until 2020 final data, which is available with me. I am telling in that 10 years, bilateral trade has almost doubled. That is positive. Doubled. So good. From right now, last year it was around $87 billion. Right. But India's trade deficit is growing every year with ASEAN countries. And the Commerce Ministry people say that this is because of the FTA. With not only this, with the ASEAN FTA, with our CEPA with Japan and CEPA with Korea, all have contributed to India's growing trade deficit. So this is what the perception among the Indian Commerce Ministry and the Indian Trade Ministry, Indian businessmen. So ASEAN has benefited more than India in the bilateral relations. India wanted FTA in services. So because we said that will be beneficial, particularly to Indian IT industry and also for the finance industry, banking sector and all that. So that has right now come into force in the last year, and we are still signed an FTA on investment, which has not yet come into force, but it probably next year it will come into force, FTA. So India wants all this to some kind of offsetting the losses due to the FTA on goods, which has caused a lot of heartburn in the Indian thing, and because we have reduced the customs duties for imports from ASEAN countries, and there is also belief that there is a lot of goods from China are also reaching India, taking advantage of this ASEAN India FTA. So the rules of origin, etc., we need to strengthen it, etc. So that is one aspect first. That is, India, in fact, wanted a review of this FTA. When Prime Minister talked about it in 2018, we wanted a review, but this review still has not yet taken place. In October 2021, last month, India-ASEAN summit meet virtually was held because of Corona. It was not physical, and Prime Minister also emphasized that we want a quick review of that. ASEAN said also, yes, no problem, but no deadline has been given. I don't think it is going to take place because there is a growing concern in ASEAN that India is turning protectionist. India is not opening up its market. So Prime Minister talks about Make in India, Atmanirbhar and all. It may get him votes, but in reality, it is nothing. It's not changing anything on the ground because there are structural problems, infrastructural problems. It is when you say all these things, it creates some kind of apprehension in the minds of the friendly countries, partnering countries. So India is turning protectionist, like Trump has made US more protectionist. So India is not for free trade. India wants to open up our markets, but they are not ready to open their markets in reciprocating that. So this feeling is happening, and not only that, this problem is mainly due to the way what India handled about why India left RCEP, whether it is good or bad. I'll be talking about in the economy part. Regional Economic Cooperation Agreement. This we have been talking for more than 10 years. This involves all the major economies, not only ASEAN, India, China, Japan, Korea, Australia. All these countries are not US, are part of this RCEP negotiations. The negotiations, according to ASEAN people, are delayed only by Indian negotiators who wanted more. We are more concerned because since China is also part of that, since we already have huge trade deficit with China, we were putting a lot of conditions, conditionalities and all that. But when, in spite of all Indian objections, when they decided to sign it in 2020, India finally pulled out. So this was a huge disappointment for ASEAN countries there. So they are the core of RCEP, is the brainchild of ASEAN, and it also, India said that we act east. Where is acting? You are the reason for the delay for 10 years. बात करेंगे, because if China does 1 year में सब कुछ खत्म करेंगे, they will negotiate and sign it. Because of India, it got delayed, and finally, when it was ready to sign, when most of your concerns are taken care of, then you suddenly pull out. The pullout in India was mainly due to concerns that past trading agreements have not been beneficial to India, and it has actually increased India's exports have increased, but imports have increased more than that. That led to higher trade deficit. So they didn't want to do that. So you could have went back 10 years back itself. We could have signed long back, and we could have continued our economic journey with other countries who are ready to do so. So ASEAN countries are really, really upset with India after India pulled out of the RCEP. I think when everything was ready for signing in 2020. So this has affected India's economic relationship with ASEAN countries there. So we have to wait and see what will be the reaction of how the bilateral trade will improve after the coming into force of ASEAN-India FTA on services, which India believes that to some extent will offset the huge trade deficit in the trade in goods. So this is one first thing which has affected the bilateral relationship between India and ASEAN countries. Right. Second thing is The promises made by India, as I said, India बात करेंगे and India never fulfill नहीं करेंगे. Promises made by India, not fulfilled. Whereas China does that. India never does that, and that is the biggest problem, as I keep on saying, in the bilateral relationship. So one thing is, of course, RCEP, or which I mentioned, that India deterred in the negotiations, and it has not been, taken very kindly by the other countries. What are the other promises made by India, and which are not, according to them, have not been fulfilled? First one. You can always in the exam you have to write about in point format and all that. Right. In 1,000 fellowships. First point was RCEP, economic thing delivered is not there. Second one is, this is for people to people contact, cultural contact, educational contact. As I said, India has a strength in education, healthcare, vis-a-vis because of the English speaking. Technologically, Chinese universities are better than India. Most of them are in the top 100 in the thing. None of the Indian universities, including IITs, are there in the top 200 universities as given by the three famous educationalists. 1,000 fellowships for ASEAN students to do PhD in IITs, Indian IITs, was announced in all fanfare by 2018. India hosted the 25th. In 2000, as I said, 1992, we had the this thing, sectoral dialogue partnership started. So 2012, under when Mr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, we hosted a summit meet to commemorate 20th anniversary. 25th anniversary was 2017. That was held in 2018 when all the ASEAN leaders were invited by India to become the Republic Day guests. So in 2018, during that commemorative meet, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, with all fanfare, announced that India will give 1,000 fellowships for ASEAN students to do PhD in Indian IITs. So this was also started in 2019 by the Foreign Ministry and Education HRD Ministry together. We also allotted 300 crore for this project. Till today, 2021, total number of people admitted is 35 out of 1,000. This was supposed to be done in 3 years. This is not a project forever. In 3 years, we will give them 1,000 fellowships. And later we said that we will also, if the success of the program, we will extend it also to bachelor degree and master's degree and all. But out of 30,000 participated, 35. Of course, India's excuse is corona's come and all those things, etc. But it's a huge setback. What we are saying, we have identified IIT Delhi as a nodal agency for this project. But after 3 years, after starting of that, only 35 students from ASEAN have been admitted in the Indian PhDs to do Indian IITs to do PhD. So this again has been a failure on part of India. Fulfill whatever we have said. One of the other promises, Nalanda University has also been not functioning properly. It got the world famous university in which Amartya Sen was appointed as a vice chancellor. Later, after Mr. Modi took over, a lot of problems came and Amartya Sen also resigned. I don't think it is working that well. And the third point is, India said in 2015 when Mr. Modi announced Act East policy, when Mr. Modi went there to attend the ASEAN India Summit meet, he said that an ASEAN study center will be set up in Northeast Hill University in Shillong, Northeast Hill University. So they started it also in 2016, but now it has been closed. For whatever reason, we don't know, but unfortunately, it is not functioning anymore. This is to create, because as I said, India's Northeast has to be developed along with, development of Northeast depends upon closer integration with the Bangladesh and ASEAN countries, which has not happened at all. A small thing, yes, then big thing, LOC, India's line of credit. Another thing Mr. Modi announced in 2015 was $1 billion line of credit to the ASEAN countries for connectivity projects. Aaj tak, not even $1 has been spent. Of course, India says projects not been finalized. There has been delay in finalizing, blah, 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 blah. but $1 billion what we have announced, not the same thing what happens in Bangladesh and various other countries I mentioned. We never follow it up. We have to finalize the process and then execute it also. That's another problem which we have not done at all there. So this next thing, what you have promised and not done, the trilateral highway. Trilateral highway, as I said, was started in 2002 as part of Look East 2 policy by Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Today is almost 20 years of the project and not that done. And it is even now just 69 bridges on the route, or even the work is yet to start on construction of 69 bridges. I don't know whether it will actually be completed in 2050 or not. We don't know that. So projects are not completed. So without connectivity, land connectivity, road connectivity, railway connectivity, how can you expect trade to flourish? So nothing is happening on this. And India in fact wanted signed BBIN. BBIN MVA agreement, motor vehicle agreement between India, Bhutan, Bangladesh and Nepal, and wanted to extend it to ASEAN countries. What is the point in extending it to ASEAN countries when you don't have connectivity at all? How can the vehicles will go when there is no road? So, trilateral highway is the highway of hope for Northeast. By getting connectivity, I said huge hub it will become for trade and all those things, etc. So, this has not yet been fulfilled and a lot of delays have been happening. And another thing, India's promise and what is actually on the ground. They always compare India with China, what it is China is doing and what India is doing, and this is how it happens there. Whatever, 5th or 6th, I don't remember. Doesn't matter point wise. India has not fulfilled and many delays in various things. So, ASEAN, India, this is not fulfillment but delays. Air transport agreement. Air transport agreement. This we have been negotiating since 2013. 8 years ho gaya, nothing has happened. Then, Air India, ASEAN, maritime transport agreement. Maritime transport is like for coastal shipping and all that. This has been negotiated since 2011. Again, no forward movement has taken place. In many rounds of talks will keep on happening. क्या फायदा है बात करने में, क्या फायदा है? You may escape with jumla domestically. 15 lakh देंगे सबको, petrol price or diesel price आधा करेंगे. All these are on record. Videos are there in the meeting, and even election manifesto is also there. You can escape with that domestically. But here, it creates a lot of problems. When you promise something and you've been talking and doing nothing, so it has a huge impact on the bilateral relationship. ASEAN countries have high hopes on India that India will grow and counter the growing weight of China, but India has failed completely to fulfill the expectations of our friendly countries. Those countries, India do not have any dispute with any of these countries. That is one of the basis of that. Whereas many of these countries have dispute with China. That's why India is loved and respected, and they wanted sincerely India to grow, but this has not occurred. Another factor, this is a second thing, India's promises have not been fulfilled. That's what I am saying. First is the economic things which have been held up, and another thing which I mentioned was about the India not fulfilling its promises. Third has been India's economic slowdown. As I said, the ASEAN started looking fresh at India only because of its growth in the second half of the 2000s up to 2011. So, this has been India's economic slowdown, means it cannot fulfill whatever the role. Only when it grows, it can go to the next level, and it can fulfill those aspirations there. Not only we are failing our own people, we are failing the expectations of our good friends in Southeast Asia. Right. Next point is rising profile of China. So, many of these people have a grudging respect of China. Respect for China now, for what China has achieved. Now, China is no more a regional power. China is a global power. They talk toe-to-toe with the US. In fact, in some other conversations, in the next lecture, I'll be talking about US-China Cold War. The way even Biden, as Joe Biden talks with virtual summit meet with Mr. Xi Jinping, which happened 2 days back. So this clearly showed that China is probably the dominant partner in the bilateral US-China relationship itself. So China is a global power. It has been growing, but more importantly, even 10 years of growth, US tries to fan up the problems in South China Sea, but there has been some stability in South China Sea. China has building artificial islands and all those things, etc. But as many people expected, there has been no battle or war, skirmishes. There have been minor this thing and all that, but China wants in 2018, they proposed a draft code of conduct for Southeast Asia. China says outside powers have no role to play, indirectly meaning US. So in ASEAN-China relationship has been growing. Economically, now they are integrated. ASEAN and China have already signed an FTA is already there. FTA is already there. Now RCEP has also come. It has become the world's largest market now, combined market, because China is also there, Japan is also there, Korea is also there, ASEAN countries are also there. Last year, the bilateral thing between, because you have to compare that with India, only then you can understand how big it is there. So China bilateral trade with China last year was $684 billion. That is 2020 calendar year. 2021 first half data is out. That is $410 billion. So likely if we double it, it is $820 billion. That is almost 10 times bigger than India's $87 billion. So the trade between China and ASEAN dwarfs what the trade between India and ASEAN. So naturally closer. And not only that, now it will boom again because of RCEP, because more and more countries are now part of the network, and it will boom. And not only that, now China this year 2020, ASEAN for last 12 years, continuously 12 years, China is the largest. Previously it was US. Now China is the largest trading partner of ASEAN countries, ASEAN as a whole, and for all the ASEAN countries, 10 countries also. And in 2020, ASEAN has become the largest trading partner of China. Previously, it was European Union. As an individual country, US is the largest trading partner of China. But as a bloc, previously it was EU. And in 2020, ASEAN, now ASEAN and China are the biggest trading partners of each other. And that the trade is already huge. Trade is bound to increase more because of RCEP and another things which are happening now. And China and ASEAN China is the biggest investor in China, invested in ASEAN, and ASEAN is one of the biggest investors. The bilateral investment is totally $300 billion between both sides. So they have closer economic interdependence, which India does not have. Connectivity, if you take China already have boundaries with most of the countries, and they are building with Myanmar. I said CMEC is going on, and now another thing which is going on is China. All these countries are members of BRI, joined China's BRI, and in 2010 itself, before Xi Jinping became the president itself, China has started China Southeast Asia Economic Corridor. Now this is also integrated, this is known as Indo-China Economic Corridor. This will connect Nanning to Singapore, to connect most of the countries of Southeast Asia, land-based countries, and with maritime countries like Indonesia, and these things all be covered by the maritime aspect of BRI. Nanning is identified as like Kunming for Myanmar, like Xinjiang for China. For Pakistan, Nanning is in a southern city. Nanning is identified as a nodal point, and a high-speed railway is coming up. And most of these countries, or almost all the countries, are part of China-led supply chain network. So their economies are intertwined, that of China network. So they are worried about the US-China Cold War. They don't make a comment openly, but they don't want this trade war. That means they are taking the side of China, because the many things which are exported by China to US, including mobile parts, etc., are manufactured by many countries in Southeast Asia: Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Taiwan, even Vietnam. And Vietnam, which has been the what they call the fiercest opponent of China, competitor for China in Southeast Asia, is also sucked into the Chinese economic arms. How? China in the last few years, last 10-15 years, have closed clearly. What they have done, it is they are moving away from low tech products, low tech, more polluting products, including textiles, and moving towards high tech products. And this because of higher infrastructure and as I said, supply chain network. Many of these low tech industries they are shifting it to Southeast Asia. There has been huge investment of Chinese companies in Southeast Asia to start this project, and one of the countries which have benefited a lot is Vietnam. Because of the long border it has, Vietnam has received lot of Chinese investment due to its low land production cost, land and labor cost, and many of the industries have been shifted deliberately by China because they want to focus upon high-tech products like mobiles and all that, rather than simple labor-intensive stuff like labor textiles, which can be done by anybody. So they have been benefited from that. And not only by that, the increasing amount of Chinese tourists visiting these countries. So they are completely under the basket. Even countries like Vietnam, which have got dispute with China, are enthusiastically want China's growth to continue. Because if China's growth flounders, they will be affected also, because they are getting economic benefit is happening. Vietnam used to be an LDC country like Bangladesh. Now they are coming out of that. It's the same miracle story. Now Vietnam exports more textiles than India. India traditionally used to have the second place after China. China used to control almost 1/3 of global textile exports. India used to have 5% global market. Now India's thing is down, and Vietnam has occupied second place, and Bangladesh also, Sri Lanka, many countries are catching up with India. So all due to Chinese investment, Chinese tourism, Chinese trade, and the economic corridors. So all these are being benefited, and that's why they become the largest trading partners of each other. So this has been the biggest turning point. They are no more looking at China as a threat. They want to be part of the Chinese growth story because their economies are intertwined. They are no more looking at India as a counterweight anymore in the last 5-6 years because of the changes. Even when you look at the corona pandemic, the way that has been handled, it has originated in China, but even today as I speak, the total number of people who have been affected in China is less than 1 lakh, something like 98,000 or something. When they find 10 or 15 people in one city, they immediately shut down that city and do vaccination for everybody, test everybody. If it is a 30 lakh people are living there, they test every 30 lakh and isolate them, and they are able to do that, less than 1 people. Whereas India has got the second highest number of corona. They compare the way India and China operate based on the way these two countries have been able to control the pandemic. China, where the thing originated in Wuhan, was able to contain it, and many people feared that because of the lockdowns initially they announced in 2010, 2020 early period, they could affect the global supply chain network and affect Chinese economy. It didn't happen. Chinese economy grew last year and is going to grow more this year. And they are seeing the way China has handled efficiently. And whereas India has completely bungled about the way we handled it. That's the reason. Though obviously Indian government will not accept that, but the data, facts are facts. India has the second highest number of people affected by that, even though many people believe that we didn't give real data to the world, particularly during the second wave in April and May. So this many things they are watching and comparing and saying, why should we hedge our support to China into India, expecting that it will grow faster and counter China, where it is not happening, and India is slowing down, and they do not want economic interaction, interdependence, and we hardly have any connectivity projects are not working. What they are promising, it's not happening. So right now, China, as I speak, is going to conduct the 30th anniversary. China also became a partner in 1992. that time 30th anniversary of their 1991 probably of their relationship with ASEAN, and Mr. Xi and all the other 10 ASEAN countries are going to conduct a virtual summit meet on November 20, about which I mentioned it. Said the other ASEAN countries don't want Myanmar to participate because of the military government and the lack of fulfillment of the agreement they signed with ASEAN 5-point agreement. So in this meet, it's not yet happened, so I can't speak, but it's highly expectation that a comprehensive strategic agreement will be signed between ASEAN and the US. This is if it happens, this is very likely to happen because I think I've read a lot of reports. This is a done thing. They just have to sign it. So it will be a slap on the face of US. US says all this, almost majority of these countries are democracies and all that. And they know US is a finished power. This is a declining power. You can't say finished power. Probably that's too far fetched. So US is a declining power and China is a real thing. It shares borders. It has economic interdependence. It's the largest trading partner and they want peace in South China Sea and in the border. They don't want, because any problem will affect economic growth and they don't want that. So the comprehensive strategic agreement will be signed. So, and there is, China is also pushing for signing the code of conduct. This may not happen. Code of conduct in Southeast Asia, in South China Sea. Yes. Code of conduct. This may not happen right now, but China is pushing for that. It clearly says that these countries will resolve the dispute by themselves. There won't be any fight or something. Through negotiation it will be done. But the wording say that outside powers have no role to play, and when South ASEAN countries even cannot conduct military exercises with extra regional players without getting the approval of all other members of this agreement, which are parties to the dispute. So countries like Laos, countries like Cambodia, so they are not party to the dispute at all, to the South China Sea dispute. The dispute later I will be talking about it. They are Myanmar, and so these countries are LDC countries. They have been gaining so much from Chinese investment and Chinese trade with them. And obviously the ongoing Nanning Singapore corridor, high-speed rail network and the industrial corridors along with that will take to the next level. And RCEP has also come. So all this now it's not to say that they don't fear China, but based on the experience of last 10 years, 15 years, they don't think that China will do anything unilaterally to change the status quo in South China Sea, because that is not the focus area of China right now. Probably it has shifted now to Taiwan, East China Sea, or disputes with the US. So they don't want to get caught in the US-China trade war, because that will be affecting them. Any slowing down of Chinese economy will have a same negative impact on the ASEAN economies also. As I repeatedly say, their economic thing is completely intertwined. So we have to wait and see whether the comprehensive strategic agreement will be signed in the coming up November 20th meeting, virtual summit meet between ASEAN and China, hosted by China. Virtual meet. So this is how the China factor. Previously, they wanted India as a counterweight. Now they are no more afraid of China. What their expectations have not been about China becoming more militaristic, more, this not happened as such there. And in the last 10-15 years, they have been sucked into the Chinese economic umbrella. And point next, why the reason between India and ASEAN has been floundering. That's the point I mentioned, that though Prime Minister has mentioned with all fanfare Act East policy in 2014, it has not really taken off, and in fact the situation is now much worse than what it was before 2014 when Mr. Modi took power as Prime Minister of India. And they also watch what is happening between India and China, between Doklam and what recently happened in Ladakh. What is it? Gawang, no? What is the name of the place? Something like Galwan. So they see China taking upper hand with India, in skirmishes with India. China is not backing off. So if they can treat a large country like India like this, how they can treat them? So there is no way they can fight China, because China is a global power, military power. They can smash them like a fly, all these smaller Southeast Asian countries. So they know China's power. China will not be under Xi Jinping's changed policy. China will not be afraid of assertion of power also. Say at any cost, they do not want any conflict with China. And if China too is ready for negotiations and code of conduct in South China Sea, why not? That's also another way of thinking by these countries which may have disputes with China. So India has not, as I keep on saying, India is not, seen as a real counterweight. It is too small economically and militarily to counter China, and why unnecessarily provoke China? So that is one of the, thing. Secondly, thirdly, another last point, I don't remember, fourth or fifth or something like that point is the majoritarian approach by the Indian government. So, whenever communal rights, say many things, India has a lot of soft power in Southeast Asia. I said Hinduism is not followed anymore. Once Cambodia was kings were thing, and even in Indonesia also, now not there. A lot of countries are Buddhist, like Myanmar is Buddhist, Thailand is Buddhist, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, all these 5 countries are Buddhist countries. Philippines is Christian. Brunei, Malaysia and Indonesia are Muslim majority countries, and Singapore is not exactly anywhere because mostly Christian, because most of the Chinese origin people who are majority and who are politically dominant, economically dominant are mostly Christians. The Buddhist countries are poorer countries relatively, except for Thailand. Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam are relatively small countries. And we don't have a direct air connection also with these countries. And as I said, Nalanda University is not floundering. Our ability of this Buddhism circuit, where a lot of tourists will come, etc., have been belied also. But the bigger problem has been with the Christian countries, that is Singapore and Philippines, and the Muslim countries. So these countries are worried about the growing, they are also watching the protests like NRC protests, like CAA protests, and various riots happened in India, or the general fear of minorities, targeting minorities, the speeches made by the far right fascist groups in India, allied with the present government. Of course, all these are highlighted. Please remember that, the Tablighi Jamaat members were again accused of bringing corona to India, and many of them, hundreds of them, were arrested and detained by the police in Delhi. Or some of you may remember sometime in March 2020 this happened. And many of them are from Indonesia. So it created political controversies. And of course, there's a far-right media and far-right social media to amplify all those things and say bad things because they are Muslim. Their only agenda was not Tabligh Jamaat or this congregation. Much bigger congregations were held, including in Uttarakhand, Haridwar, this thing where lakhs of people congregated daily for this once in 12-year program, whatever it's called. So this kind of things. So this completely affect Malaysia. The relationship got very much affected. I mentioned during prelims time also. Now recently, the statements made by our political leaders or the people who are closer to power centers, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, the Delhi CM, 2-3 months back talked about Singapore COVID coming to India, and that is causing more number of cases in Delhi. It creates an enormous amount of backlash. Singapore government also officially reacted, and various groups, civil society groups also reacted to that. So such insensitive statements made by Indian politicians. So all these are affecting our perception about India is slowly but steadily changing. India doesn't do anything. India promises blah blah blah, आता है, बात करता है, जाता है, कुछ नहीं करता है. Or दूसरा, India's economic growth is down. What we saw in India in 10 years back, it is not there in India. India is more concerned about winning votes. India, the majoritarian government is focused upon winning elections, and for that they will go to any extent. They are not really bothered about economic growth. And if economic growth is not there, obviously they'll be worried about signing more agreements, economic agreements like FTA with other countries. So why should we interact with India? So why should we let us go with China? Anyway, US is not a major power anymore in Southeast Asia. They have already vacated 20 years back, and after that they are gone. Even countries like Philippines, which used to be close to, they have big disputes with China, even today on South China Sea. But under Duterte, the Philippines president, they have moved away from US. They want to do business with China because they are economically interrelated. India does not have any connectivity. India is not connected to the supply chain network. As I said, bilateral trade is around $87 billion last FY21 financial year, which is almost only 1/10 of what they have it with China. Out of that, only $5 billion is part of the components which are used in other products and re-exported. So this is only a small fraction. So that's why repeatedly I say, unless and until you build connectivity and brought Bangladesh also into it, the supply chain, India has to be part of the supply chain network. For example, of course, in the conclusion, how to improve that, I will also say something else. So all these problems, various problems, 5-6 things, this thing, whatever you are not promised, what you have done, there also within that I mentioned 5-6 things. All this point wise, you have to mention why India-ASEAN relations or India's Act East policy has not fulfilled its potential. Simple. So a multi-dimensional view, a multi-perspective view, you need to take it to get good marks. And as I keep on saying, I always give more. Even if you are able to reproduce 60% of whatever I say, you'll get excellent marks in the exam. So signing merely on paper strategic partnership agreements, again, they repeatedly say there is no definition of what is strategic partnership agreement. So it doesn't mean anything. Connectivity is the key. Economic interlinkages is the key. So it's not happening without direct air support. India has direct linkages with Thailand because a lot of tourists go. India has a lot of direct, particularly South India was with Singapore because again a lot of Indian origin, particularly Tamils, are living in Singapore and Malaysia. And Rajinikanth is a superstar in Malaysia and Singapore also. But apart from that, Vietnam, they used to have direct connection before Corona. I'm not sure because again, a lot of Indian tourists, because it's very cheap to go there and for spending, let's say 1 week there, including air cost, it should be per 1 lakh per person used to be there. Many of my friends also visited Vietnam, and it's also a beautiful country, a lot of beautiful beaches and stuff like that are there. So we don't have much connectivity. And as I said, tourism, air connectivity is important. For trade, maritime connectivity, shipping connectivity is important. Rail and road connectivity is important. We are not able to do so in spite of 2002 trilateral highway, which, as I said, is not going to be completed in any time soon. So all this put together have been affecting and as I said, the perception that India is not India anymore. India is respected because it is tolerant and secular and it is diverse. And now the majoritarian rule threatening the minorities and all the statements made by the ministers and communal riots and all those things, etc., have been changing slowly the perception of about India also. So the soft power of India is eroding fast. So you must stop it before it is too late. These are not only destroying the centuries-old social fabric of India and destroying what exactly India is, but it is also affecting India's image in the neighborhood. In India, neighborhood is South Asia. India is feared because of the asymmetry and because of the historical problem. But in the extended neighborhood, in Southeast Asia, in Central Asia, in West Asia, India is respected because of this particular factor, the secularism factor. And this is what the soft power of India, this is what is getting eroded right now, day by day. So, in spite of Act East policy, as I said, nothing much is happening and China is gaining a bigger foothold. Of course, now they don't see India as a counterweight to China at all. As I said, we have to wait and see for the November 20th meeting whether they will upgrade their relationship to comprehensive thing. That means they are not bothered too much about the South China Sea in spite of all what US is saying. That's what I said is a slap on the face of US and its closer powers there. Definitely ASEAN do not want to get involved in any military fight. What the US is wanting, Cold War or trade war, Quad versus China. They don't want that because they are intertwined with China and it will be huge impact negatively on their economic growth. Right, India of course wants this, close connectivity with Northeast because for the development of Northeast. As I said, what are the things what you can say that India should do to further the relationship? This is what we should be trying to do. India should, promote the first thing is very simple. So we should not be focused upon right now. Of course, one of the positive things has been Mr. Jaishankar, has been, as I keep on saying, has been very proactive. Have been visiting all the countries and trying to do something. But Jaishankar himself was a former IFS man, so he knows what he's saying and he understands India's foreign policy goals. But as I keep on saying, he does not have major powers to do. So what is the ability to undo the damage done by the politicians is very, very limited. First thing is connectivity projects, speed up that, and that is the most important thing. Only that will create more economic interdependence. Connect people to people, connect, Jada, increase that. That's why I said that 1,000 fellowships, please do that, extend it to masters and this thing, do IT training, do in economic development, private sector development is very, very important. Focus upon that, not government projects, but private sector project to increase the investment in Southeast Asian countries, because of that, as I said, Mauritius offers gateway. Same thing, ASEAN countries themselves are tigers, but now after RCEP, they are connected with the other countries also. So if you set up an industry there in this thing, that will be there, and that will be beneficial to access the markets of China, Japan, Korea, and Australia also. So private sector should take the lead, and people to people connect. We should connect air agreement, maritime agreement as early as possible, and investment agreement should be already been signed, and it should be operationalized as early as possible. Without air connectivity, the tourism sector cannot benefit at all. So India should focus upon what is its strength: education, healthcare. Like as I said, the Indian hospitals, they are world class. They can set up branches there. IITs can set up branches there. So all this, focus upon, and in LDC countries like Laos and all that, India has a specific program, and we should focus upon community development projects, skill development projects. So not only IITs, ITIs, that is skill development is also an important aspect in this thing. Then avoid insensitive, like Mr. Arvind Kejriwal said, or arresting people from Indonesia for spreading COVID and all. Avoid insensitive statements by politicians. Then one more thing, India should become part of the supply chain network. So that will create economic interdependencies. For example, recently India has signed a supply chain agreement with the US Chamcha countries as part of our thing too. China is a world leader, and US is trying to promote among its Chamcha countries, that is Japan, Australia, and India, a supply chain network. And this is not going to happen because Japan is one end, India is one end, and Australia is one end. Whereas there is an integrated whole: Japan, China on the other side, Korean Peninsula and Japan just other side, and this side Taiwan. Even though Taiwan, they have a political problem, and all the Southeast Asian countries, many of them, they have land boundary and also doing economic corridors there. So that is a natural integrated thing. So India has to get integrated with that rather than so supply chain. This is known as SCRI agreement, has been recently signed. Supply Chain Resilience Initiative under the orders of the boss US. The Chamchas, 3 Chamchas have signed it. So India, China, and Australia. So we should include ASEAN. This has no meaning unless you do with ASEAN. And ASEAN already have, apart from India, India, Japan, and Australia, not China. So the ASEAN has RCEP connected there, and they have got world-class, supply chain networks, that is ports and railways. India ka problem, even if we join that, where are the ports? So maybe Adani ji will develop that. I don't know that. So we should expand. This SCRI is no starter. No, you don't need to be an expert to say that, because of the distances covered in that, and there is no commonalities are there. So SCRI network connect a recent agreement between India and Japan, Australia will be successful only when this include ASEAN, and for that connectivity to ASEAN, both railway, road, and postal, port, and coastal shipping, India has to change a lot. As I said, when you want to become part of that Trans-Asian highway, we should connect all Indian states. We are right now, Manipur is not connected. So we have to build infrastructure. Only then we can become part of that connectivity projects. So all these things should be done, people to people collaboration, more high level political estate, blah, blah, blah. You can say that. And only when train connectivity, more people will come and for the Buddhist circuit in India. So BIMSTEC, we should revitalize it. BIMSTEC FTA, I talked about it. BIMSTEC agreements, I think I mentioned about coastal shipping or something like that. As I said, already India and Bangladesh have coastal shipping agreement. India and Myanmar also have. Myanmar and Thailand have. So let us extend it to other countries in the surrounding the BIM. All these are members of BIMSTEC. So focus upon BIMSTEC development, and it's not merely one summit meet. As I said, the BIMSTEC was started in 97. Till 2021, 4 summit meets have taken place. That means an average once in 6 years. Obviously, it won't work. So you must have summit meets on a regular basis and follow up action. Even if you sign FTA, it should be beneficial, and that should be the key for success of India's Act East policy. So a lot of stuff we have discussed. I hope you'll be able to assimilate at least most of it.